Hi there. What if you could live for 200 years? Think about that. What would that mean? No, this is not going to be a video about longevity and the possibility of living 200 years, but I've often thought about that because I'm very interested. I think we could someday develop the technology to do that, and when and if we do, I intend to take full advantage of it. But here, when I first started thinking about living 200 years, I thought about the technological changes that would happen. And what would that be like? Because just think about 200 years ago. But here's what I came to conclude. The most important thing, or the most difficult thing, aside from people you know dying and things like that, is what would be the societal changes? I mean, just go back 20 years. 20 years. Would you have predicted all this? Social media? I mean, we did have the internet, but, so go back 30 years, we didn't have the internet. What does that mean? And so my goal is I like to pretend that I'm gonna live 200 years. It's just a game. Okay, it's not likely to happen, but I am taking advantage of every opportunity to take whatever anti-aging things that I can do. I'm doing that. I'm not ready to talk about some of the things I've done. I want to wait and see, but so far, so good. So let's see, maybe I'll live a long time, but I can't live a long time if I'm stuck being upset about things changing. So my goal is, just like I try to keep my body flexible, you know, doing all sorts of things like that, my goal is to keep my mind flexible, to be able to participate fully, but to be able to navigate my way through this and not be horribly upset when things are going. I mean, we now have social media, we now have mask wearing. Oh my God, I hate the mask. I'm not gonna wear the mask. So all of us individually have to figure out a way to be okay with this while we fight it at the same time. And each of us will do this in our own way. And I encourage you to do it in your own way. So for example, first of all, the simplest way and the most clear-cut way is we have got to win big this November, okay? We win big, the left and the Democrats are gonna know they did something wrong. They turned on a huge silent majority, and people don't want this. The other way is what's happening with papers like the New York Times and news channels and even Hollywood. Let's just make them, in many cases, irrelevant. They don't exist. We'll create our own. I mean, there's going to be changes. There's going to be changes to universities. You know, we've been talking about college, but when you shut down colleges, why would people pay all this tuition? Why would people even go to college when we have these other tools? So I couldn't have predicted a couple years ago that these would be the changes that we'd be living. I've always thought about the future. What would the future be like? What would the technologies be like? We never get it right, folks. It's always something different. So stay curious and stay positive. Find a way within yourself to recognize that your real happiness comes from inside yourself. So connect back up to that. If that means you have to turn off the news for a while, if that means you have to stay off social media for a while, do that. Go hold your cat, go hold your kid, be with your lover, your family, exercise, do what you need to do to keep whole inside, okay? and then we'll fight these battles. So here's what I was thinking about. I watched a documentary I had saved called The Diplomat. It was about Richard Holbrooke. And the reason I saved it, I think it came out around, it was an HBO documentary around 2003, because in 1993, for a couple months, Richard Holbrooke was kind of a mentor to me in Washington. And so I watched it again, and I was struck by a couple things that I hadn't really noticed before. So one of them was, Obama didn't like Richard Holbrooke, and he was known as the diplomat who did the Dayton Accords that kind of ended the war in Bosnia. If you don't know anything about him, he died in December of 2010. Now there's somebody who did not take care of his health. Oh my God. I don't know, did he just think he could just keep going and going and not take care of his health that way? But anyway, he really saw, and then during the Obama administration, he was kind of the point person for Afghanistan, Pakistan. They called it AFPAC. And he was very, very smart. He had learned a lot. He was in Vietnam early on as in the State Department. He had written books. He was a brilliant man and really knew diplomacy. And he saw that what we were doing in Afghanistan was a bad strategy. And he didn't think the military should have control. But basically the military did have control. And they came up with a 30,000 person troop surge. And Obama, he undercut Richard Holbrooke. He didn't like him. And it was, kudos to Hillary Clinton. She stuck up for Richard Holbrooke. She saw his value. I kind of liked her for that. She was interviewed about this in 2013, and she had some pretty good things to say. But Obama went with the generals, and got me thinking, because I was puzzled. Why would some of those generals have come out against Trump? Because Trump has funded the military. He's a huge supporter of the military. What is going on there? Well, he, unlike Obama or Bush or any of those other people, he took on the military brass. He said, no, we're not going to do these wars. He wants to pull out. And they didn't like it. So that was really telling to me. But let me say a few things about Richard Holbrooke, okay? A little trip down memory lane and how I met him. So I had started working in Little Rock, Arkansas, on the Clinton-Gore campaign. I was an advisor I came in as a kind of a defense policy person and foreign policy. But once I got there, nobody was doing space, and I was the only one that really had experience in space. So I wrote the space policy, the Clinton-Gore space policy, along with a guy in Washington who also was a space person. We wrote it together. So I had a pretty broad portfolio, and it was fun. I did science. I answered all the questions for an interview where I was Bill Clinton's voice in answering the interview for Physics Today magazine. So I was doing all kinds of things. But in July, I traveled to New York for the 1992 Democratic National Convention. So I had to look it up to get the dates again. But I remember when I was there was a meeting, some big meeting, where all the foreign policy people were in this room. And Richard Holbrooke was there, and Madeleine Albright and I were the only women there. And I do remember that she didn't say a word while these men were all pontificating. But me, I can't keep quiet. I said something that was moderately intelligent, I guess. I didn't get any pushback from it. I can't even remember what I said, but I proffered an opinion about something. But as we were walking out, I remember she said, kind of in a female bonding moment, she said, oh, you know, these guys, they just, like, just hearing them, their egos talking or whatever. So it was a little female bonding moment with Madeleine Albright. But later, I was at some kind of cocktail party or something. I don't remember exactly what it was. But I remember Richard Holbrooke came up to me. He was a very kind of charming, direct guy. And he said, how did you get here? He said it with a kind of admiration, like, where did you come from? And so we got to talking, and he ended up being a mentor to me. It took him a while to get a good position in the Clinton administration. He was talked about as being Secretary of State. But then, interestingly enough, the word got out that Madeleine Albright was on the second tier of candidates. And when that happened, all the women's groups got upset with the new Clinton administration, saying, well, why is she second tier? Why isn't she top tier? So Bill Clinton ended up picking her. But so Richard Holbrooke, it took him a while, and he stuck around Washington. I think it was around. So I went to my position in April of 1993, when I finally was there. And it was a couple months where we would meet and talk. And when I got my position, a Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Command, Control, and Communications, I wasn't really sure, having never served in Washington before, how good that position was. But I always remember something he said. He said, that's a perfect entry-level job for Washington. And the reason is because he said, you are low, it's a high enough position to get something done, but you're just below the level where you have to be confirmed by the Senate. And so if you mess up, it's not career ending. You can recover. So that's how I started out. So I found his advice helpful. And then he left for a while, and then came back as ambassador to Germany. And then later he did a lot more stuff. But at least Bill Clinton did appreciate what he did and treated him well, and so did Hillary Clinton. Okay, enough on that. But you know, it's sort of interesting as I did my little trip down memory lane, because Ron Brown, he was the DNC chair at the time, and he did a really good job. And I'll read from Wikipedia. It said, the convention, organized by Chairman Ron Brown, was seen as a great success. Unlike some earlier Democratic conventions, it had been well planned and run with few gaffes or errors, as even Republicans conceded. So this was good. And then Bill Clinton's numbers shot up because Ross Perot announced he was withdrawing from the campaign. So this was in July of 1992, just as the convention was ending, but he got back in the race in October. So it's kind of interesting to see how Ross Perot would have done. And some of you have had comments to that, and we've discussed it online. You know, if he had never dropped out, he was seen as, I remember, he was seen as kind of flaky when he dropped out. You know, going in, going out, like, make up your mind, dude. Okay. But here was the interesting thing. I got it in my head that I wanted to work at the Department of Commerce. And at the Department of Commerce, I wanted to be involved in kind of industrial policy, which I don't agree with anymore, but it's sort of like government and business cooperation. So there was an assistant secretary of commerce for industrial policy, I guess it was, and I really wanted it. And Ron Brown was very friendly to me. You know, I was thinking about this. I'm glad I don't have to deal with this stuff anymore. But there's a lot of people, you know, you wonder, why are they talking to you? Why are they helping you? Is it just because you're an attractive woman or whatever? Because that's clearly what he was doing. And I mean, I remember when I was, after, you know, I had interacted with him and he came out to Little Rock, it was kind of cool because he said, hey, Deborah, and he wanted to talk with me and walk with me. And you know, he was a pretty big duker in the Democratic Party at the time. So I got kind of some status from that, wow, Ron Brown. But then later in my hotel room, he calls me and he says, it's like 11 o'clock at night. You want to have a drink? And I'm like, oh man, no drink. But anyway. But I thought when he was named Commerce Secretary, I thought, oh, shoo-in, I'm going to definitely get this. Well, he finally interviewed with me. He clearly did not want me there. And that was a shock. But why he didn't want me there is I had my own White House connections. But here's the interesting thing. So after that, then I got a call about the Pentagon. And that, oh my God, much, much, much better position. Much better position. But here's the interesting thing. He was killed in a plane crash in April 3rd, 1996. Now, I left the Pentagon and came back home in November of 1995. But if I was involved in this, I probably would have stuck around a little bit longer. Because basically what he's doing, he was leading all these trade missions, if you will, to various countries, and he would have business. So in the position I would have gotten, if I'd gotten that position, I would have been on this plane, okay? And on April 3rd, 1996, when Ron Brown was 54 years old, and there were 34 other people, okay? I mean, this was all business people. There were people, well, I don't know where I read that, but anyway, there were all kinds of people on that. Business people. These were not just political types. These were business owners, New York Times reporter, and they crashed and everybody was killed. So like I said, there's been like, I think 3 times when I've almost died. I told you about the Challenger accident, like not getting on that. That was some time back. So I really feel like I'm blessed. Like, how did that happen? I'm so glad I didn't get that job. I thought I wanted it. I, you know, visualized it. It's gonna happen. I mean, I worked hard. I got George Mitchell, who was a Senate Majority Leader, call up Ron Brown, because Ron, and I remember when he finally interviewed me, he said, you don't have to get George Mitchell to call me. I mean, I was working every possible angle, because I actually at that time knew a lot of people. And I'm so glad it didn't happen. So instead, something completely different happened. And isn't that what life is? You think something's gonna happen, and then something completely different happens. I mean, could we have predicted President Trump? Let's go back 5 years. No, but then here he is. It's like, I have this wonderment about life, and I feel very blessed, and I feel lucky. And I've found that people who think they're lucky are lucky. Because if you really believe you're lucky, then maybe you just see the lucky things and you don't see the other stuff. Like people say, oh, I always get a good parking spot. They just don't remember the times they don't get a good parking spot. But I don't know, there's something cool happening. Something cool happening in this world. So, like, think of all the things you think are politically not good right now. Well, I have been noticing, and I say this ad nauseum, I'm sorry folks, I keep saying this every time. I had noticed this with the climate change alarmism. That's again the reason I became a Republican. I mean, I was a pretty active Democrat, as you can see. So I just saw, oh my God, they're not talking about this. They're presenting this narrative, and they're scaring people, or something they don't have to scare people about. It was like bizarre and awful. And it's like, wow, not all science is good, or at least not all science reporting is good. I mean, I love the scientific method, but no, this is not science. This is politics. This is a narrative. So, and then sort of cancel culture are these really good scientists that lost their jobs, lost their careers, who were just smeared. But now everybody's seeing it. Everybody's seeing it. And everybody's seeing how models and, like these, like all these millions of people are gonna die. It's not true. It's not true. So we all have to think about, how do we navigate this? How do we take care of this? And stay sane, stay nimble, and stay happy. And when you find yourself getting depressed or upset, just get away from it. Just get away from it for a while. Like there's some days when I just say, I can't. Look at this. I need a break. And I take the break. And I decide, what is it I'm going to do? So here was a pretty cool thing. On Thursday, when I went for my run, jog in the park, I was like, what is going on? Of course, they have all these signs, masks required. I didn't do a thorough count, but it appeared to me that there were 9 out of 10 people were wearing masks. Now, Friday it wasn't so bad, but on Thursday it was. So I'm walking back, and, I noticed the people who don't have masks. So I saw this nice man on a bike, kind of like one of those where you sit up straight bikes, and beard. I thought, he was looking at me, and I looked at him, kind of smiled, like, nice, no bike. And then I thought, that's Arnold Schwarzenegger. So I kind of like Arnold Schwarzenegger now. He was out riding his bike without a mask. And I think he was looking at me because I didn't have a mask. I don't know why he's looking at me. Maybe I'm an attractive woman or whatever. But anyway, I was just thrilled. I don't know why. That just thrilled me. That there are some people who understand they don't need to wear the mask. Okay. I want to say something about, I screwed up on July 4th when I gave this. I forgot to mention something very important. Because people, we were at aphelion. And I forgot to say it. Aphelion. Do you know what that is? You should know what it is. The Earth has an elliptical orbit as we go around the sun. I mean, it's for the most part circular, but aphelion is when we are furthest away. And the way to remember it usually occurs around the 4th of July, or 2 weeks after the June solstice. So it has nothing to do with the seasons, because the seasons are caused by the tilt of the Earth's axis. But we are farthest away from the sun on aphelion. And aphelion, so I'm going to exaggerate. Okay, so if you're in orbit, an elliptical orbit, so let's say this is the Earth. So you're going fast. You kind of go fast as you get closer, perihelion. And perihelion occurs early in the year, like January 3rd or something. So that's when we're closest to the sun. And then when you're farthest away, you go a little bit slower. So that actually has an effect, and that changes the shape of the Earth. That's one of the 3 of the Milankovitch cycles, which, create our ice ages, basically. So as that changes, and the tilt of the Earth's axis changes, and then some other things change, another thing changes. So I like to celebrate that or think about it. aphelion. Now here's the interesting thing that you will not find on the internet about aphelion. So on average, we're like 93 million miles from the sun. So there's a difference of roughly 3% in terms of how close we are and how far we are. So at aphelion, we're like 90, let me get this exactly right, 94.5 million miles away. And during perihelion, when we're the closest, it's 91.5 million miles. So one of the things I learned from Harold, my late husband, who's brilliant, by the way, brilliant, he showed me a simple way to calculate the changes in the brightness of the sun. And it has to do with radiation decreases as the distance squared. But anyway, basically comparing the brightness of the sun during perihelion in January and aphelion in July, the difference is about 6%. And you'll notice that. The way you will notice it is if you go out in the early morning. When the sun is a certain distance off the horizon, it's really cool to see. It's really cool to see. In January, the colors are so vibrant. The sun is brighter. And the reason I say early morning, because you can kind of measure the same distance and still going through the same amount of atmosphere. But I like to see it in the early morning. It's just less bright. So, sorry, I forgot. I will try to remember those kinds of things in future videos because I love that kind of stuff. Always have. Another thing I want to say is soy. Eating too many soy products. You know, there's something going on with the young people today. I mean, why would they be marching? Why would they be doing this? I mean, are their hormones okay? What's going on? So soy is very high in phytoestrogens. So I think we all kind of know that because we joke about the liberals with their soy lattes and whatever. It's almost like the men have less testosterone or something. But I looked into it. I thought, and here's a shocker. It's mostly, I mean, there hasn't been a lot of research been done on this issue about eating too much soy. I already knew about eating too many carbs. But soy, we never were meant to eat that much soy. But soy-based baby formula, about a fourth of the infants have that. It is a concern. It affects their endocrine, which is your hormonal system, development. They're endocrine disruptors, very strong. And I just think, what are we doing? I don't know, but is that one of the reasons why, or one of the contributing factors as to why you've got this gender fluidity stuff? I don't know, but I don't like it. I don't like it. One more thing I did is this morning I just thought, okay, there's an HBO 2020 documentary on After Truth, Disinformation and the Cost of Fake News. So I watched it just to see what the left had to say about the cost of fake news. Now, I should have looked because at the end, one of the executive producers was Brian Stelter. And I'm like, really? That's that CNN guy, kind of chubby dude. But it was so, I mean, they made some points. It was a lot about Alex Jones and InfoWars and Seth Rich and about that one guy who thought that there were things going on at this pizza place. And he came in with a gun because he was going to uncover all the children being held. But I thought, well, he was just misguided. he didn't want to kill anybody. And when he didn't find anything, he put his gun down and let himself get arrested. But they made it like it was so horrible. And I thought, but you're not talking about other stuff. I didn't hear anything in your fake news, when you're interviewing New York Times people and CNN reporters. First of all, I didn't hear anything about silencing climate skeptics. I heard nothing. It was all about Russian propaganda and Russian interference in the 2016 election. Nothing about Chinese propaganda. Nothing. Nothing. It's like China did not exist as an issue. Nothing about spreading undue fear regarding the coronavirus. Let me give you an example. When I was at the grocery store, I saw People magazine, and they have this one guy. He was like 42, and he died of complications of COVID-19. I mean, I don't know how they were treating him, because he was some kind of actor or something. He was involved in Hollywood. But they're highlighting one story, and I don't know how he was treated. And it's just by picking one story and putting it out there. That's a kind of a fake news, because the way the human brain works, you hear the story and you freak out about it. That's true for anything. I remember reading a story about a young person, someone in their 40s, dying of sepsis. There was a guy at work at Boeing, and Harold came home and he said, God, he was only like 49 years old, and Steve, he died of sepsis. It was like a shock. Well, if he was on the cover of Time magazine, of People magazine, and people writing stories about it, it would suddenly become really big in people's minds, and maybe it should be. What happened to the 100,000 people a year that die of hospital accidents or mistakes? I've heard that number bandied about over the years. But anyway, I just listening to this disinformation, the cost of fake news, this HBO documentary. They did bring up one Democratic guy who actually did, I guess they were trying to be sure that they were fair. And this was in that Alabama Senate election between that Moore guy and then Doug, I forgot his name, but whatever. So they planted a bunch of stories that the Moore candidate, he had trouble with younger women or something in his past, so he wasn't a good candidate. But they planted all these stories about how he was going to try to make Alabama go dry, and that would hurt all the people. They really planted fake stories, totally planted fake stories. So this guy kind of got in trouble for that later, because, they had fake conservatives coming on and saying, we need to get rid of all the alcohol in Alabama. But I thought, who is going to decide their vote on that? Because all you have to do is ask the candidate. Listen to the candidate yourself. Did he say that? Or are you just relying on what other people say? That's the best way to do it. Listen to the candidate yourself. Other people are going to say that the candidate is saying this or that, but I'm not going to believe it until I hear what they have to say. I hear what their program is. I might read somebody's opinion, but that's not going to be the deciding factor for me. Do they really think we're that stupid? No. And also this idea, I really dislike this idea that, Trump is leading people in this particular direction. And I'm like, no. I like Trump because he speaks what I value. He fights for what I value. That's why we love him. It's not like he comes along and, Trump wants this, so we want that, the same thing. No. He expresses and fights for what we want. And that's why we love him. So, on that note, I encourage you all, keep doing what you're doing, and do what you can do. okay? Do what you can do. Talk to people. Remember, all of this will pass, and actually things are pretty good right now. As bad as they may seem, I've actually lived long enough to realize there's virtually been well, except for maybe last January, there's never been a better time to be alive than now. Never. Okay? We're just aware of things, and we have these tools, and how wonderful is it? How absolutely wonderful is it that I can sit in front of my little iPhone and talk to you, and there's really an amazing amount of people who want to listen. It doesn't really matter the total number of people, because I don't really want people to listen if I'm not your style, or if you don't find what I have to say of any value. I was thinking about that too. Oh boy, I get off on all these topics. I mean, for example, what if instead of 2.47K subscribers, which is what I have right now, which is pretty cool, what if I had 2 million subscribers? What difference would that make? It'd just be a thought in my head. Oh my God, I got 2 million subscribers. I remember that one day when I was invested in this one stock, and it was going up and down, up and down. And I was checking it because it was like, wow, every day it's going up this much, dropping this much. And then I thought, why am I letting myself be happy or sad by what this stock is doing? It's just a thought in my head. What if I thought, it's going up today, and it wasn't? I'd be happy. What if you thought, Trump is going to win big, even if the polls are saying no, he's not? Just tell yourself what you want to believe and enjoy your life, and get out and vote and get other people to vote. And I'll talk to you next week. Bye.